Welcome, everybody. We're really happy to see you all here today. My name is Elizabeth Ames, and I'm here representing Time's Up Tech. We are a group affiliated with Time's Up, which you probably know from their start in Hollywood, and working to address workplace safety, equity, and dignity for women of all kinds. I have a variety of people on the panel with me, so I'm going to start closest to me, Maria Salamanca. And Maria is an investor with Unshackled Ventures, but she also participates with All Raise, which is a group that is also affiliated with Time's Up. So welcome, Maria. Next to Maria is Tammy Cho. Tammy is with a organization. She's one of the co-founders and CEO of a group called Better Brave. And Better Brave focuses on providing information and support to both the victims of, or the targets of sexual harassment, but also people who are bystanders to sexual harassment, and also sort of retribution in the workplace. Yeah, retaliation, there. I knew it was a word. Next to Tammy is Carolyn McGourty, Supple. Do you go by all three? Yeah.
I'm conflicted. Sometimes I use my husband's last name, and sometimes I use my own.
There you go. So Carolyn is with an organization. She's one of the co-founders and the chair of an organization called Press Forward. Press Forward is also affiliated with Time's Up and is focused on workplace safety, equity, and dignity in the media industry. So she'll be able to talk about that. And then next to her is Fox Melton. Mimi is the Senior Director of Community Mobilization at Code 2040. They work with African American and Latinx community in terms of getting them into the tech workforce. So, and then at the very end over there is Stephanie Lampkin. Stephanie is the founder and CEO of Blendor, and she is also a volunteer at Time's Up Tech and has been an integral part of our working group on data, and she's got a lot of expertise in that area.
Can I just say that I feel like you're very cut off in front of we can't see you very well. It's possible.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
Is that good? Is that better? Make the couch?
It works for me.
Oh, there we go. We're going to get cozy. So I'm going to start today with Tammy and Carolyn. They both founded organizations that have been affiliated with the Time's Up movement from pretty early on. And so I wanted to start with the two of you to talk about that affiliation, that collaboration, and kind of what have been the benefits and what could we do that would be even more powerful, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
So hi everyone, I'm Tammy, the founder of Better Brave, and one of our major programs has been to really create these resources that empower employees with knowledge about their rights in the workplace and what their options are. And as part of that effort, we also have a national help center where people can contact us, and based on their situation, we'll be able to help them with everything from documenting their incident to report to HR, to connecting them to different resources such as support groups or even employment lawyers. And as part of that, our collaboration with Time's Up has been essential because there's many organizations like Time's Up that offer these incredible resources to individuals who are trying to navigate harassment. And in this instance, if an individual needs to connect with an employment lawyer, we've been able to tap into Time's Up and the network that they built with the National Women's Law Center to provide some additional legal support for these individuals. And there's so many different resources that individuals need to navigate their incidents that, it's difficult for our organization to build all of those from scratch. And that's where the collaboration comes into play and partnering with organizations like Time's Up.
Well, good morning, everybody. Wanted to thank Elizabeth for organizing this panel and for Tech Inclusion for hosting this topic. My name is Carolyn McGourty Supple, and I'm a co-founder and chair of the Press Forward. And our story is that we were founded back in the fall of 2017. Many of our brave co-founders told their stories in the press about some of the powerful men in the media that I'm sure you've read about. We're award-winning journalists. Some of us are still in the profession. Some of us have left. We're management consultants, CEOs, technologists. We worked at the top outlets in American press, and we weren't content with letting the moment go by with simply being defined as victims. We felt that we wanted to be focused on systemic change and the issues that led to harassment, which were also inequality, incivility, a lack of ethical leadership. So we came together in the fall, and we launched on the same day that Tarana Burke and many of her counterparts were named as Time's Person of the Year, and the Silence Breakers were named Person of the Year. And we, since then, have focused on 5 initiatives that we felt would lead to lasting change. The first one was that we felt it was really critical to have good data. So we wanted to be able to tackle the problem, because you can't really solve it unless you know what you're solving for. So we're working with a national consulting firm for a groundbreaking study we'll be announcing at the end of the month to give a picture of what American newsrooms look like, because right now they don't reflect America. And we feel that the news can't matter in American life unless newsrooms actually reflect America. The second issue that we felt would really lead to systemic change was better training. So we're partnering with the Poynter Institute, and we've innovated sexual harassment training, and we're piloting those in newsrooms this fall. The third area that we thought would lead to lasting change was a legal defense fund, so that there would be accountability and protection for those who face discrimination or harassment in their careers. Even though there might be some famous people who you think of when you think of journalists, the average journalist only makes about $34,000 a year, and many are very vulnerable. And so we felt that it was really important to team up with Time's Up for their legal defense fund, and since we've referred a few journalists to them who've come to us. We also thought it was critical to have dialogue at this watershed moment, because we also understood that a lot of men were feeling unsafe right now. And the worst thing that could happen with this was for this whole movement to be seen simply as a gender issue. For us, it was also a human decency issue. And there were a lot of good guys out there who needed to know what was appropriate, what was not, and also make sure that there are standards and language around appropriate behavior, because let's face it, if we think that women are equal, they can be equally bad. So we wanted to make sure that we talk about all the complexities of these issues. And then lastly, we'd like to build a culture assessment tool to help newsroom leaders get feedback. So our partnership with Time's Up has been critical, because they've also helped to unite us and connect us with others who are focused on these issues. While we're narrowly focused on a specific industry, we've learned a lot of best practices and connected with other leaders in the movement and shared their values. And then their legal defense fund is really a game changer. A lot of this is about the law and whether those can be protected or not who face discrimination and harassment. So it's been an honor to be on the journey with them. And none of us in our group are rich or famous. We just saw a problem that we wanted to fix. We were the most impacted. And again, we felt that we had to be on a journey for change, not just be defined solely as victims.
So I want to bring in some of the other panelists here. One of the things that happened pretty early on in the development of Time's Up Tech was a discussion about how was this group going to be different from other groups that were already working in tech. And so pretty quickly, we felt like one of the things that was really important was to not duplicate stuff that was there, to try and figure out how we could leverage the organizations that were already there or were emerging. So I really want to bring in Maria, who is been involved in the venture and the investor community and startup, and also Mimi, who has been at Code 2040. These are organizations, Allraise is a little bit newer, but Code 2040 has definitely been around for quite a while working on some of these issues. So I'd love to have the two of you talk about collaborations that you currently have or that you would like to have down the road or that you think would be helpful.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, Code 2040, for those of you who aren't familiar, has been around about 7.5 years, and we started as a direct service program connecting Black and Latinx computer science majors at four-year universities with internships in the tech industry. And the reason that we started there was at the time tech companies were like, yeah, we're super white, but it's because Black and Latinx people don't know how to code. And if they did, we would hire them. And we knew that that wasn't actually true. So we were like, okay, well, if we found these elusive people for you, would you hire them? And companies were like, yeah, absolutely. So that's what we've been doing for the last 7.5 years. And in the last 2 years, we've begun taking a really hard look at that work and kind of asking ourselves, like, is it enough to simply help folks from our communities get jobs? Is that changing anything? And when we looked around, we really believed the answer was no. It wasn't changing enough. So we are now kind of transitioning in a big way this year to focus on systemic change within the industry. And part of that is a renewed commitment to working collaboratively with other organizations. And, you know, we've talked a lot about how hard it is for nonprofits to really reach out and collaborate with each other in the climate of like competition around funding, and really feeling like if, you know, you can't go into a funder meeting without being asked, well, how are you different from Black Girls Code? Or like, why are you better than Girls Who Code? Or you name it. And so we realized like we just have to stop playing the game. We have to stop playing the game, and we really have to take a stand. We're in a position of privilege. We have really solid funding. We have really solid supporters. And if we're not willing to kind of put our necks on the line and take a stand, then who else really will be able to? So I was telling Elizabeth before we came up here that we basically refuse to answer questions like that, like, why are you better than so-and-so? And we say, they're awesome. This is the work that they're doing. If you want to fund them, you should absolutely fund them. And it doesn't have to be an either or game, right? So I think, to be honest with you, that like a lot of the process of being willing to collaborate has been understanding how systems of white supremacy play inside our own organization and inside of us as Black and brown people, and where we can choose to identify the way that we are supporting those systems and complicit in them, and then make choices about moving differently. And that opens us up to believing that this is like actually not a zero-sum game, but rather there's enough resources to go around, and that we can, we're not missing out by like putting other people on, you know? So honestly, we're at the beginning of that because we haven't been operating that way. But we're really committed to it. And we're seeing, this is the final thing I'll say, like recently we had a conversation with a CEO at another Black organization, and our CEO and their CEO were just kind of chatting. And they found out that they had been strung along by the same rich guy with both organizations promised $5 million in funding. And the person had basically made us both jump through all these hoops, and then at the end of the day, there was no money. And that we found out that they had done this to multiple other organizations, that all of us were putting in time to get this huge amount of money, right? But that person is not serious about it and was never gonna give that money. And I'm like, damn, could you imagine if we had like had a once a month meeting where we were like, who are you guys funding? And like, who's funding you? And who's funding us? And who's real and who's not? We could have all saved ourselves so much work, you know? But that takes humility and being willing to be like, yeah, we didn't get the money. Oh, you didn't either? Okay, cool.
So once again, my name is Maria. I work for a small pre-seed fund here in Palo Alto, but I am really involved with All Raise. For those of you that don't know much about All Raise is basically a nonprofit organization that was started by women venture partners. And so the venture capital industry as a whole is over $300 billion of management. These are the people who are at the top investing in the best entrepreneurs and deciding what gets funded and what doesn't get funded, right? And so most of these funds are actually fairly small, right? I mean, a big fund has maybe like 10 partners, 15 partners. A very small fund has 2, 3. But they manage millions and billions of dollars, and they decide what is a good idea, who is a good entrepreneur. They get to decide if they buy into the vision that any entrepreneur and founder comes to them. And the problem is that less than 9% of those venture partners making these decisions are women. And so it's actually, it goes down into everything else that goes into tech, right? Because a lot of kids don't see themselves as tech founders because there isn't anyone that looks like them, both women and people of color. A lot of people don't look to go into tech because of this. And so it really goes down the entire chain of what goes on, because these people are the ones deciding who is the next Zuckerberg, who gets to go on the Fast Company magazine, and who gets to have that money. And so as an organization, there's a couple of different things that we're starting to do. And so every woman GP kind of owns a specific part of it. And obviously, these are also women GPs who have a full-time job, obviously, doing investment. But we have something that is men in the movement. So is how do we involve male GPs, venture partners, in helping them understand why they should fund women founders, why they should have women partners on their part of their fund. And a lot of this has not been easy per se. I mean, there are many, for example, we have office hours in which female partners get to, any founder gets to come and talk to these women partners without having to like go through all the jumps and hoops that it is to get to a VC. But something that they've been very active about as Always is if you are at a fund that does not have a woman partner, you cannot come to office hours. And what that means is that for business, it means that you don't have access to what we call deal flow or the founders or all kinds of ideas, simply because you just have to have a woman partner because it's female founder office hours, it is female GP office hours. And so we are working with them, and they're very supportive, honestly. I don't think anyone's happy with the way the industry works, but having less than 9% of decision makers being women, it leads to less than 15% of companies that are founded by women being funded. So it's actually very low. And if you look at, I don't think innovation is split that way, that women only come up with 15% of the ideas out there. So it's definitely, we have a long way to go, but Always is really, really focused on entrepreneurship and venture partners.
So I want to bring Stephanie into the discussion, and she's been a great collaborator within Time's Up Tech. And one of the areas that we have spent some time and done some thinking about is, how do we apply technology to help other organizations? So some of the organizations that are here are other organizations that are affiliated with Time's Up or the central Time's Up group as well. So maybe you want to make some comments about that or other things that were said here.
Yeah, so I'm an industrial and software engineer by trade, so I oftentimes think about problems in terms of how we can solve them more efficiently, leveraging technology resources. And one of the things that attracted me to the Time's Up Tech data team in particular was how do we first use data to figure out where the problems are. So one of the things that spun out of that most recently was the gender equity gap. We talk about pay gap, but equity is almost threefold problem for early startup employees and founders. It's like a 9%, women own 9% of all startup equity versus 91% for men. So I'm very much rooted in how do we get access to this data as efficiently as possible and start holding people accountable. We personally, Blendor, launched something called Blend Score, where we audited over 200 companies on their overall equity, inclusion, and diversity, and quantified it. Put a score to it, ranked it, and made it public, sent out a press release to over 300 media outlets, and said, hey, we want this to be like the US News World Report ranking for companies. We want it to impact your brand. We want it to impact your ability to attract the best talent. Because the reality is there are straight cisgender white men who don't want to work for a company that doesn't have a woman on their board. And so I think a lot of what we're doing is sort of cutting through the noise of what we call diversity theater and actually printing out the receipts to demonstrate who is really solving these problems as opposed to just throwing money at it.
One of the things that I really see when I hear all of you talking is how all of these pieces that each of you are addressing are all part of a spectrum of things. They're all part of a a process, a timeline, a flow of what happens. And so to me, one of the things that's really interesting is how do we band together so that we cover the gaps between that and we leverage, what happens on the investment side, how we get other groups in, how do we increase those groups, how do we make sure that we're addressing some of the big problems that we have out there. So we have just a couple of minutes left, but I thought it would be great to kind of just go, we'll start with Stephanie and come this way, but just talk about like, if you had a magic wand of, cooperation and the power that cooperation could give us, what would you want? What would you ask for?
Data. Obviously. As mentioned, with a lot of these organizations, they feel a little guarded because they have this moat that they're trying to protect. But I think we would be way more empowered collectively if we could leverage the access to information that we all have access to move forward the agenda.
Building on that, I'd say a vehicle that allows folks to metabolize data, metabolize practices, really to learn how to be better, how to do better, how to operationalize change within themselves and with their organizations. So much of that we do one-on-one through coaching or in workshops and facilitation. It's really labor intensive. So how do we begin to create like heart and mind level change within individuals and systems on a grand scale?
I think change comes over time, so we should be patient. It's going to take time and resources. It's not going to happen overnight. We're kind of if you look at the science of change, which I have because I'm a nerd, like you actually see that there's some models that show when you first see a problem, there's defensiveness, there's awareness of the issue, and then the curve starts going down where people won't want to address it, they resist it, and then they begin to see the benefits of change and they begin to adopt it, and then society actually goes towards the end of the curve and we're transformed. I think we're at the beginning of the journey, so it's really important for us to tell stories of success as much as there are problems. I think that's where the press can help. Where I think our group would really appreciate collaboration is technology and data, because I think that those are critical tools to realizing some of our ambitious goals. We were contacted last night by a journalist from India. They're going through their whole Me Too movement right now, and they're watching how the US is handling it. And they came to us because they wanted to understand, well, what did your journalists do? What have your industries done? And so the world is watching us, and I think it's very important that we set an example sometimes when we feel very alone on this journey, to know that there are people in the world who don't have a voice, and we're very lucky that we do. And so as we continue to fight the good fight and reach out to those who maybe aren't in this room and don't know that there needs to be change, using language that can reach them, and make sure that we're living up to our values and truly being inclusive.
Yeah, I think another way to really push for change is for everyone in this room to, think about one action step that they can take after this panel to further this movement. Whether that's, looking into our organizations and seeing what opportunities there are to volunteer, or even if you see, you've evaluated a lot of different organizations that are pushing this movement forward, and you realize that there's some type of gap, knowing that there are very simple steps that you can take to make an impact. And I say that because even for my own story, when we were starting Better Brave, we weren't intending on creating an entire organization around it last year. It started with, as women from the tech industry, having personal experience with both harassment and discrimination in the workplace, and then wanting to figure out why that issue is so pervasive. We then set out and interviewed hundreds of people about their experiences dealing with these issues. And from there, that's how we identified different gaps, and we're then able to create different resources to address that. Mm-hmm.
I think we're almost out of time, so Maria, you get the last word, and then we'll let everyone go.
Okay, I'll make it really quick. Sorry, I saw the sign. Something that I learned, so I'm actually pretty politically involved as well, and a while back I started a PAC or super PAC, I don't know, it's called Swing Left. And when we went for funding, and I think all nonprofits or non-for-profit should maybe do this. When swing left was focused on winning back the U.S. House for Democrats, and at the time after the election, there was a bunch of all these like new left organizations that were coming up, and everyone was focused on different things. And one thing that we did at the really, really beginning, back when the election just happened in 2016, was we are all going to own a different part of the pipeline, and we are going to all bundle up when we go to donors. And so the first time we went to ask for money, we said, look, Flippable is going to take state raises. Swing Left is going to take the U.S. House. There's going to be this one organization that's going to focus on governments. And when we would go to funders, we would say, we have to win it all. So you have to invest in all of us. And for all the executive directors to say that at the same time was actually really, really effective.
Thank you. I think we have to go. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.